Chapter 6. Entering the Pure Sect, Cultivating the Fire Cultivation Potential. Hanju didn't have to wait long before an outer sect warden arrived. He was also at the 9th level of the Key Refinement Realm. I'm an outer sect warden of the Pure Sect, Yang Lu. Brother Han, can you let me do a quick check? Fiendish cultivators occasionally tried to infiltrate the Pure Sect in the past few years. The outer sect warden said politely, cupping his hands. Hanju didn't have anything on him and wasn't afraid of a check. He raised his hands. Yang Lu began to feel around. After he finished searching, he asked doubtfully, "Why do you not even have a storage ring or storage pouch?" Hanju helplessly said, "I was attacked by a Foundation Establishment Realm fiendish cultivator on my way here. To stay alive, yeah, I'm sure you understand." Yang Lu was silent and looked at him sympathetically. "Can you show your spiritual energy?" Yang Lu asked. Hanju could understand. It was to check if he was a fiendish cultivator. He immediately raised his right hand, wielding his finger like a sword and pointing towards the cliff at the side. Swish! A beam of spirit ki shot out from his index finger, piercing into the rocks. Yang Lu's eyes lit up. What kind of spell is this? He didn't ask, but he could feel that Hanju wasn't a fiendish cultivator. "No problem, follow me. I'll bring you to the outer sect for registration. From now on, you're an outer sect disciple of the Pure Sect." Yang Lu smiled. Then he led Hanju into the valley. As Hanju walked, he asked, "How many outer sect disciples are there? What are the conditions to enter the inner sect?" "There are more than 2,000 disciples in the outer sect. Only those who have reached Foundation Establishment can enter the inner sect. However, Foundation Establishment is very difficult. Every 3 years, the sect will hold a sect competition. The top 3 will all receive Foundation Establishment pills. Foundation Establishment pills can help a 9th layer Key Refinement Realm cultivator breakthrough to the Foundation Establishment Realm." "Are there many inner sect disciples?" "I'm not sure about that. The Pure Sect's inner sect is located in a small world. We have no idea what's happening inside. It seems like Pure Sect is very powerful. Of course, the Pure Sect is the most prestigious and established cultivation sect in the Great Yan. Does the Pure Sect have places to cultivate with lightning and fire spiritual ki?" "There aren't any in the outer sect, but there might be in the inner sect. If you have a thunder cultivation potential, you can appeal to the Elder Hall. Perhaps they can make an exception and allow you to enter the inner sect. Having rare cultivation potentials like this is normally enough for the sect to especially nurture you." Yang Lu was secretly surprised. Could it be that this guy also had a thunder cultivation potential? Hanju's eyes brightened as he asked, "As long as I have a thunder cultivation potential?" Yang Lu nodded. "Brother Yang, can you nominate me? If I can enter the inner sect, I will never forget your kindness," Hanju said in a low voice. He raised his right hand and sparks crackled in his palm. Yang Lu's pupils contracted. The outer sect warden of the Pure Sect, Yang Lu, has a favorable impression of you. Current favorability, 1 star. Yang Lu laughed. "Since you're already calling me brother, I naturally have to help you with this matter. I'll make an exception and explain this to the Elder Hall." "Thank you, Brother Yang. I'm very grateful." Sure. Yang Lu had been stuck in the 9th level of the Key Refinement Realm for 20 years. It was very difficult for him to make any more breakthroughs in his cultivation. The only thing he could do was to form connections. Following Yang Lu, Hanju saw many outer sect disciples meditating along the way. The outer sect did not allocate special cultivation grounds and cave abodes for the disciples. Everyone just randomly found a place to practice their breathing techniques and were not to cause trouble. Soon, Hanju arrived at the outer sect's buildings. Most of the buildings were very similar to Elder Iron's buildings and looked antique. There were also many disciples on the streets. Other than cultivators, there were also mortals. It turned out that there were also many mortal slaves in the cultivation sect. Slaves were not only needed by alchemists, mortals were also willing to serve them. At the very least, they wouldn't encounter any life-threatening situations and would be able to fill their stomach. The Elder Hall was located in the center of the valley. It had 4 floors, and the entire place was filled with a strange fragrance. Hanju followed Yang Luo in. Yang Luo walked to the counter and said, "A 9th level key refinement realm cultivator wants to join our Jade Pure sect." The first floor wasn't big, and there was only an old man at the counter. The old man glanced at Hanju, causing him to uncontrollably tense up. He couldn't tell the old man's cultivation level. Could he be a Foundation Establishment Realm cultivator? Egg. The old man responded and turned around to take a small rectangular wooden block from the wooden cabinet behind him. Yang Luo asked in a low voice, "Is the first elder here?" This person has a thunder cultivation potential and wants to enter the inner court. Thunder cultivation potential. The old man looked at Hanju in surprise. He waved his hand. Hanju immediately walked up to the old man. At the same time, he made the system only reveal his thunder, fire, and wind cultivation potentials. Triple cultivation potential. The old man was shocked. Triple cultivation potential. Yang Luo wasn't surprised. Instead, he looked slightly envious. Register yourself first. You will be an outer sect disciple for the time being. When the first elder returns, I will tell him about this matter, the old man said in a low voice. Hanju started the registration. After that, Hanju received the sect pass, a storage bag, a Jade Pure sect Taoist robe, 100 low-grade spirit stones, and a bottle of key condensation pills. Yang Luo personally arranged for him to stay in a wooden house not far from his. "All right, Brother Han, you should rest first. Someone will inform you when there's news. I still have things to do." Yang Luo smiled. Hanju cupped his fists and watched him leave. Yang Luo's attitude made him feel very real. It was different from what was written in novels. Even if Yang Luo wanted to form a good relationship with him, he wouldn't deliberately try to please him. They were all cultivators. He wasn't going to be a simp just because Hanju had better potential. Hanju closed the door and started to cultivate. He could finally cultivate without any worries. Something surprising happened again. He could actually sense fire spiritual ki here. Hanju decided to first cultivate his fire cultivation potential to the 9th level of the key refinement realm. Generally speaking, cultivators would only choose one technique to cultivate. Most cultivation techniques only had a single elemental attribute. Very few people would cultivate with 6 elemental attributes like Hanju. Hanju's cultivation potential was top-notch and he didn't feel tired at all. He enjoyed the feeling of becoming stronger. More accurately, it was the feeling of his lifespan increasing. When Hanju saw the attributes panel, his first thought was to live forever. He didn't want fame or fortune. He didn't want to marry a beauty. He only wanted to live for very long. He didn't want to suffer from a terminal disease and die at a young age again. With my cultivation potential, I don't need to take risks and seek opportunities. I need to cultivate diligently and never cause trouble. If I can avoid provoking my enemies, then I shouldn't provoke them unless they want to kill me. Hanju thought silently. Half a year passed in the blink of an eye. Hanju's fire cultivation had reached the 4th level of the key refinement realm. The outer sect first elder finally returned, and Yang Luo personally came to inform him. Hanju packed up his things, tied the storage bag on his waist, and followed him to the elder hall. Initially, the elder hall had already forgotten about this matter. I happened to pass by your door and noticed that you were still cultivating, so I suddenly remembered it. I'm sure the first elder would like a diligent cultivator like you. Yang Luo smiled. His tone was full of admiration. Hanju didn't open his door for half a year. If not for the spiritual key fluctuation inside, others would have thought that it was an empty room. Hanju smiled and said, "Many thanks, Brother Yang. If I have the chance to obtain more Foundation Establishment pills in the future, I will definitely obtain one for you. Visit and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much." Chapter 7, Fairy Xaixuan's favorability grew. Elder Hall, Hanju met the first elder. The first elder was plump and resembled Maitreya Buddha. He had a smile on his face and his eyes curved into 2 lines. He sized up Hanju and said with satisfaction, "His temperament is comparable to inner sect disciples and almost equivalent to an elite disciple." The J Pure Sect robe was white with blue stripes. After Hanju wore it, his charm was completely unleashed. He didn't look like a servant at all. Many female cultivators peeped at him on the way here. "I cannot be compared to the elite disciples," Hanju said humbly. The Grand Elder smiled and said, "Let's go, follow me to the inner sect. If you want to join the inner sect, you have to find a master. There are 18 peaks and 18 missionary elders in the inner sect. If anyone is fond of you, you can directly become an inner sect disciple. If not, you can only participate in the outer sect competition and strive to reach foundation establishment as soon as possible." "I understand." The two of them then left the elder hall. The old man at the counter clicked his tongue in wonder. This child's fire attribute spiritual energy has increased by quite a bit. It seems that he has been diligently cultivating for half a year. Yang Luo laughed. "That's right, he didn't leave his room even once. He has good talent and is willing to cultivate diligently. Who knows, he might even become an elite disciple in the future." The old man shook his head and laughed. He didn't say anything else. He had been here for more than 100 years and had seen geniuses more talented than Hanju. He only felt a little emotional but didn't think too much about it. They didn't speak on the way. Following the first elder, Hanju arrived at the teleportation formation in the corner of the valley. Several disciples were guarding this place. The teleportation formation was very much like an altar. It was a circular stone platform with strange patterns engraved on it. Stone pillars were erected in all directions, and there were many irregular dents on them, which were especially used to insert spirit stones. This was Hanju's first time using a teleportation formation. He was very nervous, but he didn't dare to show it, afraid of embarrassing himself. The outer sect disciples began placing spirit stones. "What kind of training style do you prefer?" the first elder suddenly asked. The various peaks have different cultures because of the different personalities of the coaching elders. Some are competitive, some are low-key, and some are out on missions all year round. Hanju replied, "I'm a low-profile cultivator. I don't like crowds and I don't like being high-profile." The first elder revealed a strange smile and said, "Then I'll bring you to the Jade Serene Peak first." At this moment, the teleportation formation was activated and a strong light burst out, causing Hanju to close his eyes. Hanju felt a strong sense of weightlessness. Any other mortal would have vomited. About 3 seconds passed. Hanju opened his eyes, and what he saw was a mountain peak that reached into the clouds. The sea of clouds filled his vision, and he felt as if he were standing on a cloud. Under his feet was the teleportation formation, and in front of him was a stone step that led to the city. The city was located on a lower peak compared to the surrounding 18 mountain peaks. However, when Hanju looked down from the teleportation formation, it was like a 10,000-foot high cliff. Due to the clouds and mist, he couldn't see the ground. The city on the lower peak was very big. Many cultivators could be seen flying with their swords in the sky. There were even various kinds of ferocious birds. That's the inner sect of the Jade Pure Sect. You can do missions and collect your salary here. You can also trade inside. The first elder introduced the inner sect with a proud tone. Hanju was stunned. He had thought that the Jade Pure Sect was a small sect like in the cultivation dramas. He didn't expect it to be so big. He thought he had arrived at an immortal world. He had truly underestimated the strength of the Jade Pure Sect. After all, he had been staying in the herb garden for the past 20 years, and his activity was limited to a radius of 2 kilometers. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to call him a caged bird. The first elder waved his hand. Hanju felt something lifting him and almost fell. He looked down and saw a huge gourd under his feet. "Stand firm. If you fall, you'll die even if you're at the 9th level of the key refinement realm." The first elder laughed heartily. Hanju quickly covered the bottom of his feet with spiritual force to stick himself to the gourd's surface. The huge gourd carried them towards one of the taller peaks. The other huge peaks had disciples traveling in and out, and only this one seemed inactive. The coaching elder of Jade Serene Peak is Fairy Kaksakeswan. Her cultivation level is unfathomable. She likes to cultivate in seclusion, with peace and silence. Therefore, Jade Serene Peak is not lively. In addition, she doesn't allow her disciples to develop feelings for each other and become companions. Therefore, there are very few disciples. The disciples who stay on Jade Serene Peak are basically all ascetics, the great elder said with a smile. Hanju raised his eyebrows and said, "Really? That's great." He was afraid of female cultivators pestering him. After all, his charm was unparalleled. The first elder shook his head and laughed. The first elder of the outer sect of the Jade Pure sect has a favorable impression of you. Current favorability, 1 star. A line of words appeared in front of Hanju. He was baffled. Soon they arrived at the palace complex of the Jade Serene Peak and flew straight to the main hall. His mouth moved slightly as the first elder stood in front of the door. He was probably using a voice transmission technique. Boom! The front door opened. The first elder led Hanju in. The hall was dark. As they walked in, the oil lamps on both sides lit up. Hanju's gaze landed on the two figures meditating in front. Two female cultivators. One of the female cultivators wore a blue robe and had a graceful bearing. Her appearance could be described as devastatingly beautiful. She was probably Fairy Swan. The female cultivator behind her should be a disciple. Her temperament and appearance were quite different, but she was still a beauty. Fairy Swan opened her eyes and looked at Hanju. As the first elder approached, he smiled and said, "This child's name is Hanju. He's an itinerant cultivator with a triple cultivation potential and also possesses a rare thunder cultivation potential. On the way here, I asked and found out that he also likes quiet and peaceful training grounds. He doesn't want to be too high profile." Hanju bowed. Cheng Yuer has developed a favorable impression of you. Current favorability, 2 stars. 2 stars just like that. How shallow. Hanju complained in his head and became nervous. Jade Serene Peak is not living up to its name. Are the female disciples all so desperate? Fairy Swan opened her mouth and warned, "If you join my peak, I will not treat you any better than others. Everything will depend on you. In terms of cultivation, I won't neglect to teach you. But if you slack off, I will chase you out of the peak." Hanju immediately promised, "As long as there are no instructions, I can enter seclusion for 100 years and never leave my house." Really? Absolutely true. Fairy Swan has a favorable impression of you. Current favorability, 1 star. Cheng Yuer's favorability towards you has decreased. Current favorability, 1 star. Lines of words appeared in front of Hanju. He couldn't help but look down on Cheng Yuer. "Are you so desperate for love? This is a land of cultivation. Do you know any spells? Attack me. Let me see your ability," Fairy Swan asked. Hanju nodded and decided to go all out. This Jade Serene Peak suited him too well. If it were any other peak, he would be annoyed to death by female cultivators like Cheng Yuer. Hanju was definitely not heartless. He also liked women, but women were definitely not as important as lifespan. Right now, he only wanted to cultivate. Lust is a knife in disguise. Once his cultivation had reached a phenomenal stage, he would be able to nurture a few companions to play with. However, he wouldn't use his true feelings. He would only cultivate together with them. Hanju channeled the spiritual power in his body and pointed his right hand at Fairy Swan. Sword ki burst forth from his 5 fingers, condensing into a palm-sized sword clay that shot towards Fairy Swan like lightning. Just as it was about to touch Fairy Swan, the sword kai dissipated into thin air. Fairy Swan's beautiful hair began to flutter. Cheng Yuer's favorability towards you has increased. Current favorability, 2 stars. Visit and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. Chapter 8, A Nascent Soul Realm Master, only needs Thunder Spirit Key. Hanju looked at the notification and waited for Fairy Swan to speak. Fairy Swan asked, "Is this the only move you know?" Yes. Hanju was very honest. He didn't want to pretend to be better. This sword technique is not bad. All right, you may stay at the Jade Serene Peak. Fairy Swan nodded slightly. The Grand Elder laughed. I shouldn't disturb you anymore then. He nodded at Hanju and left. Fairy Swan stared at Hanju and said, Aren't you going to kneel and acknowledge me as your master? Hanju came back to his senses and immediately knelt. Disciple Hanju greets master. Long live master. Fairy Swan couldn't help but laugh. Do you think I'm an empress? Hanju didn't look up. Fairy Swan thought to herself, this child carries himself well. His temperament is also not bad. She took out a token from her sleeve and handed it to Chang Yuer. Bring your junior to the inner sect to register and arrange a cave abode for him. Yes, master. Chang Yuer carefully stood up. Hanju stood up and bowed, then left with Chang Yuer. Just as they walked out of the palace, the door closed behind them. Junior Han, my name is Chang Yuer. From now on, you can call me Senior Chang. You're a newcomer, so if there's anything you don't understand, feel free to ask me. Chang Yuer smiled and met Hanju's gaze. She didn't feel shy and stared straight at him. Hanju lowered his head slightly and said, Thank you, Senior Chang. I wouldn't dare to trouble you, but if you need a helping hand, you can tell me at any time. You're such a nice person. He's more handsome than the other male seniors and juniors. This was the first time Chang Yuer had met such a handsome man, and his attitude and personality made him very comfortable to interact with. She swore to herself that she must protect Junior Han and not let him be bullied. 26. The two of them went all the way to the edge of the cliff, chattering and laughing all along. Chang Yuer took out her flying sword and let Hanju stand behind her, hugging her waist. Hanju hesitated. Other than you, the other male juniors don't have a chance to hug me by my waist. Chang Yuer snorted. But in fact, Hanju was the first male junior she had met. In the entire Jade Serene Peak, only Hanju was her junior. It had been years since Jade Serene Peak had a new disciple. 2. Since she had already said that, Hanju didn't want to be pretentious. He had to agree that Senior Chang had a slim waist. 2 hours later, Chang Yuer brought Hanju to a cave entrance and said, Inside is your cave abode. My cave abode is right beside it. You can cultivate in peace. So close. Hanju looked in the direction she pointed. The entrance of her cave was 100 meters away. Hanju sighed in his head, but he still thanked Chang Yuer. The two bid farewell. After entering the cave, Hanju saw a knob on the wall of the cave. After twisting it, a stone door closed at the entrance of the cave. Immediately after, the cave lit up. 2. He walked towards the end of the tunnel. The cave was about 100 square meters. There was a bed, a table, and a wooden cabinet. He was treated well. Hanju sat on the bed and took out the newly obtained inner sex storage bag. The inner sex storage bag was 10 times larger than the outer sex storage bag. It had a space of 100 cubic meters. 4. He obtained Jade Serene Peak's Duoist robe, a flying sword technique manual, Jade Serene Peak's token, 100 middle-grade spirit stones, and a bottle of key condensation pills. Through Chang Yuer, Hanju learned that a high-grade spirit stone was equivalent to 100 middle-grade spirit stones. A middle-grade spirit stone was equivalent to 100 low-grade spirit stones. 1. Spirit stones could be used for cultivation or currency. He immediately retrieved the 1,000 superior grade spirit stones from his attribute panel and placed them into his storage bag. 6. This amount of spirit stones was enough to make Hanju rich. The providence of being the descendant of an immortal emperor was indeed amazing. He was given 1,000 superior grade spirit stones from the start. Hanju opened his characteristic panel and checked his interpersonal relationships. Chang Yuer, second stage foundation establishment realm. She treats you as her younger brother. Current favorability, 2 stars. 6. Fairy Swan, third level of the nascent soul realm. Your master admires your temperament. Current favorability, 1 star. Treats me like a younger brother. Hanju was speechless. Favorability didn't mean romantic affection. He was thinking too highly of himself. However, he was very surprised by Fairy Swan's cultivation. She was a nascent soul realm cultivator. The outer sect's first elder was only at the Foundation Establishment realm. The Key Refinement, the Foundation Establishment, the Golden Core, and the Nascent Soul realms were all the realms that he was aware of so far. In other words, Fairy Caixuan was the strongest cultivator he had encountered so far. Not bad, not bad, Hanju thought happily. He packed up his things and started reading the Flying Sword Technique manual. He had to master the Flying Sword Technique. Otherwise, he would have to hug onto his senior's slim waist whenever he needed to go down the mountain. His top-notch sword technique talent allowed him to master the Flying Sword Technique in an hour. He dripped blood on the flying sword to make it recognize him as the owner. This method was recorded in the 6 Paths of Reincarnation technique. After everything was done, he walked out of the cave abode and stepped on his flying sword. He began to circle Jade Serene Peak to familiarize himself with the Flying Sword technique. In the Jade Serene Hall, Fairy Caixuan suddenly opened her eyes as a strange look flashed across them. Is this really the first time this kid has cultivated the Flying Sword technique? She had eavesdropped on Hanju and Chen Yu's conversation before. Was he lying? If he was lying, why would he suddenly display his Flying Sword technique now? Fairy Caixuan couldn't figure it out and decided to observe for a while longer. After Hanju flew dozens of rounds, he quickly returned to his cave abode to cultivate. He started to cultivate his fire spiritual power. You have successfully become an inner disciple of the Jade Pure sect and started your first cultivation after entering the sect. You can choose the following development path. Hanju took a look and face-palmed. What the hell? Leaving Jade Serene Peak to become the strongest peak would instead offend Fairy Caixuan. His master was very strange. Is she a fiendish cultivator spy? Hanju shook his head and smiled, silently choosing the second option. He wasn't interested in unparalleled equipment. All he wanted was to cultivate diligently. 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. Hanju successfully cultivated his fire cultivation potential to the 9th level of the Key Refinement realm. All that was left was the Thunder Spirit Kai. However, he couldn't capture any Thunder Spiritual Kai on the Jade Serene Peak. Hanju was distressed and decided to pay a visit to his master. He immediately got up and walked out of the cave abode. He executed the Flying Sword technique and quickly flew to the entrance of Jade Serene Hall. He knelt in front of the door and said, "Master, I have something to ask of you." He didn't raise his voice. He was sure that Fairy Caixuan could hear him. Before long, the door opened. Hanju walked into the hall at a medium pace. He walked up to Fairy Caixuan and knelt, saying, "I have cultivated my wind cultivation potential and fire cultivation to the 9th level of the Key Refinement realm. I'm only lacking the Thunder Spirit Key before I can proceed to Foundation Establishment. Master, please tell me where I can find Thunder Spirit Key." Fairy Caixuan opened her eyes and frowned. "You want to cultivate all 3 types of spiritual power?" "Not 3, I'm cultivating 6 elements." "Yes, Master," Hanju replied respectfully. Fairy Caixuan said softly, "This isn't an easy path. The heavenly tribulation you encounter will also be stronger than others. You can cultivate 1 type of spiritual key first. After you reach the Golden Core realm, it won't be too late to cultivate with the other spirit Kai. Visit and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. Chapter 9, 3rd level of the Foundation Establishment realm, Mo Fukao. I want to continue like this. Although it's difficult, I believe that with my will, I can succeed. I'm willing to spend all my time on cultivation, Hanju replied. Fairy Caixuan didn't reject him directly, which meant there was still a chance. Fairy Caixuan stared at him and said, "The intersect has a teleportation formation that leads to the Thunder Spiritual Pool. However, one needs 10 mid-grade spirit stones to stay in the Thunder Spiritual Pool for a day. At first glance, it looked cheap, but for cultivators, how could a day be enough?" Hanju said in surprise, "Thank you for your guidance, Master. I'm going there immediately." With that, he stood up and left in a hurry. Fairy Caixuan smiled before closing her eyes and continuing to cultivate. When Hanju arrived at the intersect city, he stopped a female disciple and asked, "Senior, sorry for disturbing you. Where's the Thunder Spiritual Pool? Can you tell me? That way, at the end of the road. The place that has lanterns with thunder written on them is the Thunder Spiritual Pool. Thank you. Junior. Hanju left quickly, not giving her any chance to strike up a conversation. Wherever there were people, there would be trouble. The fewer friends he made, the less trouble would find him. What are friends? We help each other, and we're friends. If you want my help, that's trouble. 10 minutes later, Hanju found the Thunder Spiritual Pool. Entering the pavilion, he saw a teleportation formation in the inner courtyard. He took out 100 superior grade spirit stones. He was going to stay there for 3 years. If he left early, he could ask for a refund for the remaining time. The J Pure sect would never cheat their own disciples. The disciples who worked here were here to clear missions. The owner of the Thunder Spiritual Pool was an elder, so no one dared to cause trouble here. The disciples working here were slightly surprised by Hanju's generosity, but they didn't say anything. Although the thunder cultivation potential was rare, the J Pure sect had more than a few disciples with it. When he opened his eyes again, Hanju appeared at a pool filled with hot air. Visibility was poor. The thunderclouds were very low, and he felt that he could reach out and touch them. Apart from him, another cultivator was already meditating nearby. Don't wander around in the Thunder Spiritual Pool. You can only cultivate by the pool. If you don't obey the rules and get killed by lightning, you deserve it. A cold snort came from behind. Hanju turned his head and saw that it was a huge tree. Its main trunk had a human face filled with sarcasm. A tree spirit. Hanju nodded at it and then walked to the side to meditate. The Thunder Spiritual Pool quickly fell into silence, and only the sound of thunder could be heard. Hanju was pleasantly surprised to find a lot of Thunder Spiritual Kai here, which made his progress cultivating his Thunder Spirit energy much faster than when he had cultivated the other spirit energies. Awesome! Hanju was extremely excited. In just a short year, Hanju had successfully cultivated his thunder cultivation potential to the 9th level of the Key Refinement Realm. He didn't leave but prepared to enter Foundation Establishment. Previously, he had already cultivated all the different types of spiritual energy to the max, and had also reached the max for the Thunder Spirit energy now. He had maxed out all 6 spiritual energies. He could go for Foundation Establishment immediately. Foundation Establishment required Foundation Establishment pills, but that was only for mortals. Hanju had top-tier cultivation potential. The first level of the 6 Paths of Reincarnation technique taught him a method to avoid heavenly tribulation. It was a very hardline approach. He would absorb the heavenly tribulation. The 6 Paths of Reincarnation would absorb the lightning from the heavenly tribulation and convert it into Thunder Spirit energy, helping him further his cultivation. A month later, Hanju started to break through to Foundation Establishment. It just so happened there were few people in the Thunder Spiritual Pool. Even if he succeeded in reaching the Foundation Establishment realm, it wouldn't attract too much attention. Meditating, Hanju kept changing his moves and practiced the 6 Paths of Reincarnation technique. 6 types of spiritual energy revolved in his body, forming 6 colored whirlpools in his dantian. The tree spirit suddenly opened its eyes and looked at him in surprise. The cultivator nearby also opened his eyes. The lightning in the Thunder Spiritual Pool began to gather towards Hanju. Is he trying to enter Foundation Establishment? The cultivator's face twitched. He silently distanced himself from Hanju, afraid that he would be struck by the heavenly tribulation. An hour later, streaks of lightning interweaved above Hanju's head like dragons and snakes. The strange thing was that these lightning bolts disappeared the moment they touched him. They didn't cause him any harm. The tree spirit and the cultivator frowned. What kind of cultivation technique is he using? It can counter the tribulation like this. Although they were surprised, they didn't disturb him. Disrupting others during their tribulation transcendence was a big taboo in the cultivation world. It was immoral. Relying on his exceptional cultivation potential and an unparalleled cultivation technique, Hanju's breakthrough to Foundation Establishment was extremely smooth. There were no surprises or danger. 3 days later, he successfully established his foundation and reached the first level of the Foundation Establishment Realm. Congratulations on reaching the Foundation Establishment Realm. You have the following choices. Hanju chose the second option without hesitation. After his breakthrough, he didn't leave immediately. Instead, he planned to continue cultivating his Thunder Spirit energy until the time was up. He first inherited the second level of the 6 Paths of Reincarnation technique. The next morning, he continued to cultivate. This person has a good temperament. He didn't even go out to celebrate his successful breakthrough. Instead, he continued to cultivate. The cultivator thought silently. A line of words appeared in front of Hanju. Mo Fuchao has a good impression of you. Current favorability, 1 star. Hanju opened his eyes and noticed that the cultivator was staring at him. Hanju nodded at him politely. Mo Fuchao nodded back. Then the two of them continued cultivating without further communication. Level 3 of the Foundation Establishment Realm. This was the cultivation level of his Thunder cultivation potential. The Foundation Establishment Realm was also divided into 9 levels. He was really fast. 2 years for reaching level 3. Most importantly, his lifespan had increased to 187 years. Hanju was very satisfied. Brother, may I know your name? I'm Mo Fuchao from the Heavenly Thunder Peak. A voice sounded from behind Hanju. He stopped and turned around. Hanju cupped his fists and said with a smile, I'm Hanju from Jade Serene Peak. Jade Serene Peak, no wonder I find you unfamiliar. It's a pity for someone with your talent to join the Jade Serene Peak. Do you want to come to Heavenly Thunder Peak? My master is a thunder cultivator. Mo Fuchao shook his head. Hanju smiled and said, I have already acknowledged Fairy Xaixuan as my master. She will be my master for life. I can't betray her like that. But thank you for your kind intentions, Brother Mo. Mo Fuchao smiled and said, Your technique is very impressive. You reached the 3rd level of the Foundation Establishment Realm in just 2 years. You're considered one of the best in the entire inner sect. Brother Mo, you flatter me. I have no intention of comparing myself with the other inner sect disciples. Ha ha ha. The two of them chatted for a while before leaving. After returning to Jade Serene Peak, Hanju didn't know whether he should go greet Fairy Xaixuan or not. Forget it. Master's also an ascetic. I shouldn't disturb her. Hanju silently returned to his cave abode. After returning to his bed, Hanju rested for a while before checking his interpersonal relationships. He found an email mark on the top right corner, still glowing red. Curious, he clicked on it. Visit and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. Chapter 10, Miserable Friend, First Disciple's Favorability. Your good friend Xing Hongxuan is being hunted down by the J Pure sect and was severely injured. She managed to escape by luck. Your good friend Xing Hongxuan is being hunted down by her fellow disciples and was lucky enough to counterattack. Your good friend Xing Hongxuan betrayed the viridescent nether cult and is being hunted down. Your good friend Xing Hongxuan's favorable impression of you has increased to 4 stars. Hanju was speechless. That's very unfortunate of her. The most ridiculous thing was that for the past few years, Xing Hongxuan was getting more affectionate of him. They didn't even meet again. A woman's heart is like an underwater needle. I can't get it. Hanju took a closer look. No one on his list had any progress in their cultivation. This is great. First, he set a small goal to surpass Fairy Xaixuan. Hanju closed the attribute panel and continued cultivating with a high spirit. 3 years later, Hanju's fire cultivation potential had reached the 3rd level of the Foundation Establishment Realm. The Thunder spiritual pool had a much higher density of spirit ki than out here, so his cultivation had been slower. At this rate, he would need another 12 years before he would reach the 3rd level of Foundation Establishment Realm for his other 4 types of spirit energy. Anyway, he could live for 187 years now. There was ample time. However, if I cultivate all 6 types of cultivation potential to the peak of the Foundation Establishment Realm, I'll probably come very close to the end of my lifespan. Hanju thought silently. Cultivating all 6 elements would take 6 times longer than if he only cultivated one. The thunder spiritual pool came to Hanju's mind. It seemed like he had to make use of these spiritual pools. In the J Pure sect, other than the thunder spiritual pool, there were other spiritual pools. There were a total of 8 attributes. The other 2 attributes were metal and ice. The J Pure sect was indeed very resourceful. This was good too. Hanju didn't need to change sects. Several days later, a bell suddenly rang on Jade's serene peak. Hanju opened his eyes and stood up immediately. Once the bell rang, it meant that Fairy Xuan was summoning all the disciples. This was the first time in the many years he had been here he was summoned. I hope it's not something troublesome. I still want to continue cultivating. Hanju thought silently. After walking out of the cave abode, he bumped into Chang Yuer. Junior, long time no see. Hey, you've reached the Foundation Establishment realm? Chang Yuer greeted him with a smile. Then her eyes widened. She was only in the 2nd level of the Foundation Establishment realm and couldn't see through Hanju's cultivation level. But she could feel that Hanju's spiritual power was very strong, far beyond what key refinement realm cultivators could radiate. Hanju smiled humbly. I was just lucky. Chang Yuer was secretly shocked. Could Junior have surpassed me? No. I have to hurry up and cultivate. I can't lose to my Junior. Chang Yuer's favorability towards you has decreased. Current favorability, 1.5 star. Hanju was confused. What the hell? Did I say something wrong? Chang Yuer chuckled as she brought Hanju up the mountain, as if nothing had happened. Along the way, they met other disciples of the Jade Serene Peak. Hanju was the youngest and had to address everyone as a senior. Different from what he had imagined, there were other male disciples in Jade Serene Peak as well. There were quite a number of them, and all of them looked imposing. There was approximately an equal number of male and female disciples. Reaching Jade Serene Hall's gate, they knelt and waited patiently. During this time, Hanju was sized up by the others. The female disciples all smiled at him. But no one developed a favorability towards him. These disciples had already cultivated here for many years. Unlike Chang Yuer, who had only joined the Jade Serene Peak a few years earlier than Hanju. More and more disciples arrived. When the gate opened, Hanju counted 56 disciples in total. Even the most downtrodden Jade Serene Peak had so many disciples, let alone the other peaks. Most of the disciples were stronger than Hanju, so he couldn't see through their cultivation. After entering the hall, Hanju made sure he was at the back. As the junior, he naturally had to be ranked last so as to avoid offending some petty seniors. Mats had already been placed in 2 rows within the hall, allowing the disciples to sit facing each other. Hanju sat at the back, facing Chang Yuer. She winked at him like a child. Childish. Hanju quietly raised his middle finger. Chang Yuer didn't understand this gesture. She thought it was a secret signal and also pointed her middle finger at him. At this moment, Fairy Xuan spoke. Sect Master has just made a decision. In the upcoming inter-peak sparring competitions, the 3 peaks ranked last will each choose 10 disciples to go fight against the Viridescent Nether cult. All these years, the Viridescent Nether cult has been sending spies to scheme against our Jade Pure sect. Sect Master is prepared to counterattack. Hanju observed the others' expressions and realized no one was panicking. Isn't Jade Serene Peak ranked one of the lowest? Hanju had always thought Jade Serene Peak was the weakest peak. Liu Sangson, the first disciple, smiled and said, Master, although we aren't that outstanding, we have always been in the top 10. Don't worry. The other disciples agreed. No matter how low profile we are, it's impossible for us to be at the bottom. The Viridescent Nether cult is getting really rampant. I heard that there are many spies of the Viridescent Nether cult in the outer sect. We have to be careful when recruiting new disciples. The cult spies don't even cultivate fiendish techniques. We should have dealt with the Viridescent Nether cult long ago. Every time I go out to train, I will meet their pompous disciples. Hanju listened in silence. Fairy Xuan said, I'm naturally not worried about the ranking. However, this also means that the Jade Pure sect and the Viridescent Nether cult will fight sooner or later. So take up missions regarding the Viridescent Nether cult from now on. Although we keep a low profile, we should still contribute to the sect. The disciples nodded. Hanju, Fairy Kaikswan suddenly called out. Hanju hurriedly got up. The other disciples looked at him. You reached the 3rd level of the Foundation Establishment realm from the 9th level of the Key Refinement realm in just a few years after entering the peak. Seems like you're a genius, said Fairy Kaikswan with a smile. Hearing this, everyone's expressions changed. The speed of progression was unbelievable. Hanju replied, I was just lucky. Master, I don't want to be high profile. Recently, the sect has come up with a nurturing program that targets the most outstanding geniuses of each peak. They will be groomed together and will become the trump cards of the younger generation of the Jade Pure sect. I would like to recommend you, said Fairy Kaikswan with a smile. The way the disciples looked at him changed. Hanju immediately knelt and said in fear and trepidation, Master, I don't want to go. I don't deserve it. I only want to stay on Jade Serene Peak and cultivate in peace. I don't want to fight for fame and fortune. Furthermore, I'm new here. I should leave such an opportunity to my seniors. It's definitely a trap. Hanju knew what was going on. Even if he was really a top-notch genius, he didn't have the qualifications to become a core disciple of the sect right after entering. How can it not be a trap? Is Fairy Kaikswan testing me? If he was a spy from the Viridescent Nether cult, he would definitely seize this opportunity. Really? Fairy Kaikswan narrowed her eyes. Hanju nodded and said, Absolutely. Fairy Kaikswan nodded. Hanju heaved a sigh of relief and sat down. The stares of the other disciples softened. Liu Sangson has a good impression of you. Current favorability, 1 star. I knew it. The first disciple wants to go. It would be a huge embarrassment for the first disciple if you weren't given this chance. Fairy Kaikswan looked at Liu Sangson and said, It should be you then. You're the first disciple of Jade Serene Peak. Don't cause trouble. I understand. Liu Sangson smiled, and the other disciples congratulated him. Visit and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much.